pull up my notes.
Oh, I'm glad you're recording.
Yes, and I will, so we are recording today, but we do want to ask that everyone else who's on the line doesn't record and that it's only viewed internally for our Jane on Demand folks. Um, Definitely also feel free to chat away. We're going to be doing we can take questions from the audience later. And yeah, let me just, while people file in, for the next couple of minutes, I just want to do some housekeeping at the top. So, my name is Carmen. I am the editorial director here at the Jane Club. I write the daily and weekly newsletters for you all. And my pronouns are she, her. And I am so honored that Marcelle is here giving up her time to be with our community today. And I'm honored to be in conversation with her. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then, we always like to start, and I would like to echo this beginning of acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which I am on here in LA, where the Jane Club's physical location started. And that is that of the Tongva tribe and their elders past and present. As we gather in a connected community online, and so many of you are signing in from all over the place, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country, the indigenous peoples and their elders past and present. I also want to name that today my highest intention is that our words and language do not cause harm to each other and to any of those who are on the line. I will hold that intention throughout the conversation, and I welcome the opportunity to stand in feedback if I fall short. And thus, yeah, without further ado, I do want to give people, let me see, we have about 21 folks in here. I think there might be another few dozen who roll in. But I do want to make sure that we, spend as much time as we can in conversation. So I do want to welcome Marcelle. And again, thank you so much for being with us today and taking the time. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me.
And, I always begin my conversations with an inception story, and I am very excited to hear yours. And I'm just curious, you co-founded Bust, you went on to do so many other feminist things after co-founding Bust, but what did your journey to, starting this magazine really look like, your feminist journey and your journey in publishing?
Well, that's a great question. My journey is, let's see, I was raised by a couple who were just married and immigrated to America from Israel. So my mother was not fluent in English for probably most of my earlier years, maybe till about middle school. And my father was a New York City taxi driver. So I come from like hardcore working class parents who had like a very strong work ethic. But my dad, when I was about probably like sixth grade, he had Gloria Steinem in his taxi as a passenger. And he came home, and this is my impersonation of my dad, but he was like, Mas, I met this woman. You got to know about her, Mas. And because in Queens, apparently they don't pronounce R's. And, that's really where it really started. I was the eldest of two, but I was the daughter of immigrants and in a bilingual household. So it really is my dad who was like, and again, let's see, if I was in sixth grade, this is probably 70s, so right at the height of like what was happening with the second wave. And, we didn't have internet. So I had to like figure out who this person was. And, we would watch news and I would try to gather what information. And I was allowed to read, the New York Times along with, when my dad would bring it home. And I sort of like so many of us, taught myself about what was happening outside the world. My mom was, not pursuing what was happening with the second wave. She was just really just trying to make ends meet and raise these two numbskulls that she had in her house and also deal with a husband. And so I think like by the time I got to high school, I was over disco and into punk rock. And in the punk rock ideology, like women are like where men are. And so, you know, stuff started to like really take hold of like my consciousness in that time period in high school. Again, like I didn't go to a public high school. I went to a yeshiva, a girls only yeshiva. So I was like juggling these, like a double consciousness kind of existence where I was having to like pretend to be a good Jewish girl, but like on the outside, I was like, no, this stuff is not good. So that's kind of like my journey, just like trying to figure it out, trying to make my way through, trying to be heard. Um, and it wasn't until I got to move out of my parents' house and move into the city, into New York City, that I started to really become engaged with like my feminist spirit. I discovered Sassy. I was in love with the Smiths. You know, I saw Sonic Youth for the first time. Like all these little things were like happening. This is like 80s. So by the time I got to 1992, I had already met the other woman that I founded Bust with. And we had met probably in like 19, oh, all the years kind of flowed into each other, but we met in the late 80s. Like I think that's fair to say. We met in the late 80s at work. And so by the time we kind of really connected on forming Bust, our ideology, our self ideology was fully ingrained. Well, particularly mine was fully ingrained. I was in my 20s. I was trying to make ends meet. I had a great group of girlfriends. I was, you know, sleeping with a different person every week. Um, I was working at Nickelodeon, and I was like, you know, like a just one step above like a desk bitch. Like I was just like really trying to figure stuff out. And I found my co-founder at some point and I said to her, God, things suck, right? And she was like, yeah, things suck. And I'm really distilling this, like really distilling this. But we like met for coffee in Tompkins Square Park in the winter of 92, I think. And it was cold and, you know, junkies and all kinds of stuff happening all over us, you know, because it was like old school Tompkins Square Park where it was like really gritty. And we're sitting there with our coffee in the freezing cold and we're talking about the future. And we were trying to figure out like how we could be a part of the future and how we can make a difference. And that was really like when we started to talk about Bust and really creating it. And then, of course, because I was in my 20s and I had no obligations, I went to Paris for a few months. And I came back with some lifelong best friends, but also like this reinvigorated spirit to try to do this thing that I had talked about with this woman that I kind of knew some time ago. And that's when like we really started to form our language, our manifesto, if you will, and everything kind of rolled out of there.
And I mean, I think something I love about Bust is that it brings something to the feminist landscape, to women's lives, that other feminist magazines still really don't. It sort of is this very, like, I feel like Bust is a magazine where people can bring their whole selves and they can feel like all the parts of themselves are being, you know, seen and reflected back at them. It's not just about, you know, one way to be a feminist. It's not just about one issue. It's not super academic. And I've noticed that that's something that you have brought to Bust and your other projects as well. And I'm just curious about, what does that future look like for you? Like you talk about envisioning the future. What is the future you were trying to build? What's the future you're still trying to build?
Well, thank you for that question. Well, you know, I left Bust in 2001, right about the time I had my daughter. I came back from like what was called a maternity leave, and it was just like, okay, it's time not to be here anymore. But I had a daughter now, and so a daughter really, I guess I guess children in general, they kind of really force you to reckon with like, you know, taking the pavement poster down off your wall and putting up a Dr. Seuss print, you know, like having a child after being somebody who was, after being me for so long, you know, somebody who went out every night. I went to see bands every single night. I went to see movies every, you know, like I was always out because, again, like at that time in the 90s, UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, had just formed, and I was going to see improv, and, you know, I had friends in bands. Bikini Kill was still performing, like all this really cool stuff was still happening. I was going out into the world. Like I would wake up, I would go to work, and at the time I was working at HBO as a promo producer, but at night I would leave wherever I was working and go to a club. And I don't mean the club to dance, I mean to like to see a band or to see comedy or to see any place where women were on a stage saying things that were inspiring to me. And, you know, once I had the kid, once I had the daughter, I started to think, well, like, what should I do now? Because I don't have this job. I'm raising this child on my own. I became a yoga instructor so that I could focus on prenatal yoga, because what I found out when I was taking prenatal yoga when I was pregnant was when you're around women who all are in the same boat that you're in, like, oh my God, a baby's coming out of me. It's like really good to like connect with other women. And then after my daughter started to go to school, like nursery school and kindergarten, I decided to go into the corporate world. And I was really fortunate that the right projects popped up at the right time. So I became a creative director at Lifetime Television. And at Lifetime, which is something I had done in the 90s when I was working on Bust, I started producing breast cancer PSAs. Like actually in the 90s, I was one of I was like the lead of the breast cancer PSA awareness campaign at Lifetime Television. And I was the first, like we initiated those campaigns. And then like when Lifetime pulled me back in the 2000s, they were like, we want you to do that again. And like the really amazing thing is like right now I'm freelancing at another corporation, and they have in recent years asked me to do the same thing, create more breast cancer PSAs. So anyway, so, you know, part of like, retaining your feminist spirit when you're raising children is to like instill those values in your children. So, you know, I was still being like an activist. I was still like teaching my daughter, like, you know, raise your voice. If, you know, a boy can do the monkey ring, so can a girl, you know. And it's like, you know, I think like when she was in kindergarten, she had to do a presentation of expert of the day, and I was like, you know what you're an expert in? You're an expert in feminism. She's like, what? And so like I helped her put a little book together to teach her classmates like what feminism is and how everybody in the room was a feminist. It was really, I thought that was like a high point in my life. And anyway, you know, I raised this daughter. She's a feminist activist. You know, she's on a TED Talk on being a feminist. She's written a book called Earth Hates Me. She's a stand-up comic. You know, so a lot of like my legacy is now sort of like the baton is being handed over. I blog now. I have a blog called Barb, and really it's all about like being a woman on this side of 50, like where like the landscape of being a woman really changes quite a bit because your body is changing. I mean, this is still my natural hair color, but stuff is starting to change, you know, like, so I'm still moving the ball along. What I envision is that we just keep doing that. I just like, of course, I don't want anything to happen Roe versus Wade, and there's all these bigger things that I have to think about, but just like on a very simple day-to-day, like I'm still walking the walk.
Yeah, and what did feminist parenting look like for you? Something that came up when Dory and I were talking about this event that I thought was really funny was this idea of, you know, trying to make sure that we don't push values so much that our children are like, well, I'm not a feminist because I can't handle that you're so into this. And like my mom was a feminist, but definitely she looks at me and she's like, you have taken the things that I was like passing on to you subtly and just magnified them 12,000 degrees. And so like, what did feminist parenting sort of look like for you?
Well, I'm sure your mom is so proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm sure she is. You know, the great thing too is, um, you know, there's 1,000 books on parenting, but the reality is you have no idea what you're doing from 1 minute to the next. And, you know, your range of emotions. Am I doing this right? Did I break the baby? What did I do? Like, oh my God, look at me. I'm so great. Like, you know, there's no real rule book. And so I think like you have to really get who your kid is, because, and if you have like 10 kids or 2 kids or whatever, I have one, but like you have, as a person, you know, you have to know how your kid is wired, and then you can help guide that child along in his or her journey. And so for me, I raised my daughter by myself, along with like my how to say, my village of friends. You know, like my friends were there with me every step of the way. Like I would have this, like I would show up at something and have this like, you know, person in my shoulder being like, hey, we're here, you know, like a two-headed carp. But like the way I instilled a feminist spirit in her is just like I said, from the sandbox. If you can do that, he can do that. If he can do that, you can do that. It doesn't matter, you know. And the really like the easiest way to explain feminism to a child is like, boys and girls are of equal value. Value is a big word. So you distill it to, again, I go back to the monkey rings. If you can do the monkey rings, a boy can do the monkey rings. And if a boy can do the monkey rings, a girl can do the monkey rings. Like we're all going for the same thing here. And so she kind of picked that up very quickly. She also had the luxury of seeing me yell at people when I would feel like they would step on her toes. Like, you know, I think we were at a store once and she was 4 and she was touching things. And, you know, when 4-year-olds touch things in stores, it's like a business. It's their business. They don't want like little fingers. And the person behind the counter yelled at her and I went, excuse me, no, 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 no. And so like my daughter would see little acts of rebellion all the time on her behalf. And so she got very quickly that, you know, don't mess with my mom. And 2, that's my mom, you know?
I love that. And you know, I was also really excited to talk to you today because I am a child of the 90s, also raised by a single mom. Of course, since I grew up in the 90s, my memories of the 90s are definitely like rose tinted. I'm always like, everyone was super feminist then, right? Like everyone thought that girls could rule the world in the 90s. And I'm like, oh, that was just me and my mom. I see how that is. But like, what was it like for you to be sort of coming of age and then starting this feminist magazine in the 90s? Like how things have changed so much since then. So what was that landscape really like? What was that reaction like to your work? And how have things, like how have you noticed things changing, and how has your own feminism sort of evolved?
My I'll start with the last question. My feminism has sort of remained the same. You know, I go back to like we're of equal value. I was very, very angry in my 20s. I am very, very angry in my 50s. I'm 56 and I am pissed off. I don't wake up as angry as I might have at different times in my life, but like, you know, I actually had to cut the cord because I'm so angry. I don't want to watch the television. So, you know, so that the spirit is there, like, oh, it's just like the throb is there. You know, the anger helps propel the activism. It's just like, okay, I'm leaving my house and I'm going to march. Like I marched in the pro-choice rally in 1992. Like I don't even think I went to the bathroom. That's how determined I was to like march all day. Although again, in the 90s, I could do that. You know, when we were doing Bust, it was really like we had so many role models or people like us doing things that we were doing. We had Riot Girl. I'll even give the Spice Girls a little bit of kudos. Like we had PJ Harvey, there was Missy Elliott. There were so many women. You know, again, I sound like, our grandmas. At that time, we had MTV when they played music videos. So like you had depictions of women that weren't simply about, it wasn't simply about the male gaze. You had depictions of women like Gwen Stefani when she was in No Doubt. That girl was badass. She's bananas now, but she was badass then. Like she was amazing. Like you had this girl just like, it was just like I'm like you. I'm like my daughter when she hears me talk about the 90s, she's like, oh, there she goes again. She's going to talk about bacon. She's going to talk about how much she likes wedding presents. She's going to talk about that time that she hung out with blah blah blah. And yeah, no, I could talk all about that. But the reality was I was working every single day to make sure that women had something to get off their chest. When I was co-editing Bust, we got submissions from women, and we took those submissions and we put them into our hard copy magazine. We published it 4 times a year, I think. It was self-funded for a very long time. And we were one of us was, oh, she still is. One of us was married, but the other 2, we were single, and we were barely making like $30,000 a year, but we funded this thing ourselves. And like as you're going through this thing, you're not calculated. It's only in retrospect that I see that we were filling a white space. We were honoring our brand, and we didn't identify those things, because we just understood that we had something we had to get off our chest. We understood that we loved sassy. We understood that Riot Girl was happening. Like we had all this like knowledge, and we applied it to Bust, but we didn't have like a 10-year plan and a 20-year plan and a 30-year plan. Like we were just trying to get by. But we had a vision of our feminist world and we had, I think in our first issue, no, I'm actually right about this. In our first issue, we even had a manifesto, like why we were doing this and, where it was coming from. And really it was coming from this anger. It was coming from like our frustration with the male gaze. It was coming with our frustration with the patriarchy. It was coming from our, all of this stuff. And we wanted to, give something back. We wanted to participate. We wanted to like give back to our culture, our feminist culture, but we also wanted to have a dialogue with other women who are like us, without texting, because we didn't have that yet. We didn't have email, like we didn't have a lot of stuff, but we knew that we could create a conversation. And that's kind of what we were trying to do.
I love that. And on that nitty gritty level, like, would you say that there were ways you went about starting your business when you were starting Bust that were like feminist? Like, were there ways in which you intentionally tried to start a business on your own terms in sort of varying that business model? What did that look like?
That's a really great question. The answer is no, because the 3 of us were not business women. We didn't have MBAs. We were artists. In fact, like for a very long time, I took on the role as publisher. I was the one who was like dealing with the money and the advertising and the distribution, because there was too much work and we had to divide and conquer. I would have preferred to just be working with words, but like we had to like split it up. We didn't have a feminist, there wasn't a business, we didn't even have a Wharton business model. We were just trying to figure it out. And every step along the way, because zine culture was much like the internet is now, zine culture was like it was like a 2-way street. Like you put your zine out, you got feedback from the other zine publishers. There was a store in the East Village that only sold zines, and for a very long time, basically until I left in 2001, we were a zine. We didn't really even call ourselves a magazine. We were a zine. We were doing it ourselves. Oh, actually, that's wrong. We sold in 2000. So basically till 2000, we were just doing it ourselves. So no, we were really like, we were really trying to figure out. Now when women like start businesses, or especially if there's 3, I'm always like, make sure you all know what you're doing and make sure there's a contract, because there's going to be some backstabbing and it's going to get ugly. But if everything's on paper, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like I've done work in sort of always in feminist spaces, and a lot of times there is that DIY feel even in like a nonprofit space. It's just a much different way of operating. There are no really like, the idea of rules or a marketing or business plan is just like why would we do it that way? We have to do it this way. And so what do you feel like you learned as an entrepreneur, as a sort of business person in the world? Like what did you learn from that process that you've taken with you elsewhere?
What I've learned is, is to read the fine print, is, really have defined goals, really have like those scope of works or statement of works are very important, to have a contract in place, to have job descriptions in place, because even though we're all feminists here and we all want the best for each other, there has to be a hierarchy, there has to be a decider. Like if, in general, like it's in the magazine world, there has to be somebody who's making the editorial decision so that the voice can be consistent throughout. If you have three different visions, the brand is not aligned and the voice is different. So it needs to come, you have to have, a hierarchy can be like a positive thing. A hierarchy can work, and a hierarchy doesn't mean that you're not being feminist or that you're not supporting women. A hierarchy just means that you have some things that you have to answer to and that there's a decider. So you don't spend like, you ever go to PTA meetings and you have all these people there who haven't been working in a corporate space for so long, and it's like, can someone decide if apples are okay? That's kind of the thing.
Totally. And, one of the ways that the Jane Club dismantles white supremacy is by interrupting and challenging that narrative around like meritocracy and being self-made. And you've talked a lot about villages and, starting this magazine with a team and working in these collaborative spaces. And so I want to ask you sort of what systems of privilege do you think enabled your journey to success, and how on that journey did you maybe become aware or reckon with them? Like how has this feminist work also made you really reckon with those systems of privilege?
Oh, well, it's glaring in what we were doing at Bust, because until we started, let's see if I got this right, until we started putting talent on the cover, it was just artwork. And then we started realizing, oh, if we put a person on the cover, other people will be like, I want to hear what Margaret Cho has to say. I want to hear what Bjork has to say, or I want to hear what Missy Elliott. So we started to realize, like, again, like we were learning as we were going along. And sometimes when I look at like the first, I guess it was I was involved until the 18th issue of Bust, and I look at some of those covers, and the covers are not reflective of our culture. Like the covers are mostly white. There are some, there's a few people, but it's mostly white. And when I look back at it, I'm like, where was everybody else? Why were we seeking everybody else? What was going on? I can't speak to what Bust looks like now because I'm not involved in it, but I recognize, I mean, I was editing a piece, and I realized that I didn't understand the piece. And I showed it to a friend of mine who wasn't in Bust, and she was like, girl, this is a Black girl talking about fucking a Black guy. And I was like, oh, I missed all of that. And I realized it was like a real moment. It was a real moment of me of like being like, oh my God, like, where have I been? So I work at it. I work really hard at it because I have that really embarrassing moment of being completely, what's the word? Oblivious to like what was going on around me.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like a lot of times, especially right now, like we talk about anger, we talk about grief, like we have these really powerful moments that motivate us to do feminist work, but what joy do you feel like you've claimed by doing this work?
Oh, wow. That's a great. I'm currently taking classes at college because, as it turns out, I didn't graduate. I was having so much fun that I didn't even realize that after 4 years I didn't have a gown. I just like went off to start my life, and so I've gone back to college to finish to get my bachelor's, because the other thing that happens on the other side of 50 is that ageism starts to creep in. Um, so now I'm taking these classes, and I'm taking a class called Black Women Writers, and it's taught by this brilliant woman named Professor Shelley Eversley. And sometimes, you know, a lot of the thing about college, you have to participate, but sometimes I can't participate because I'm so emotional listening to the women talk about being women right now. Like I'm just like crying, and I have to turn the video off because I'm just being like a what you call it, like a mom instead of like a student. So I see our legacy in my classmates, and it's overwhelming at times because it's just wonderful. It's wonderful to see too, like when I talk about the future being female, it's wonderful to know, to be around 20-year-olds, not just my daughter and her friends, but to be around 20-year-olds that I don't even know, that are really pushing the envelope and moving forward. You know, we were sharing the Megan Thee Stallion op-ed in the New York Times, and everyone was like, da, da. It's just like, okay, we're good. I can go to sleep tonight knowing that like we're in good hands.
I love that. And I mean, you know, we're living through this moment right now where there's sort of this feminist explosion. And I'm curious, you know, there was a lot of stuff swirling too, obviously in the 90s. There was Anita Hill, there was Riot Girl and zine culture. There was sort of also in that moment a parallel of just sort of an uprising that happened collectively in a lot of different places. What do you think we can do to keep capturing those kinds of moments to really, you know, like you all sort of leveraged all of that energy into Bust? How do we bring that energy, harness it into something powerful and lasting? Like how do we make sure that those moments are not lost, that they create things that become legacies?
Well, look what you're doing at Jane Club, right? You've created a haven for women to connect. I mean, being a mom is the worst sometimes, but it's the best sometimes. And you've created, I just realized that my daughter might be here. But like you are creating like this very safe haven where you can just sort of like let it all out, like take off the bra and just go, I can't. Or you know, here's a like a recipe, or here's a thing, or here's a that, or whatever. Oh, you've got you need me to cover, I can cover. Like I see it happening at the Jane Club. Like you guys are reinforcing and continuing to build on this legacy that started with our moms and their moms and their moms. Like you see it in every pocket of life. And so, you know, the more Jane Clubs we have, the more Jezebels we have, the more Barbs we have, like the more we're still active and still saying like, no, we're here and we're not going anywhere.
Totally. And I think too, you know, that this is a moment where a lot of women want to speak truth to power, tell their own stories. And obviously, you not only created platforms for women to do that, but you have so fearlessly done that throughout your career, throughout your life. How do you summon that courage? What can the folks tuning in today and later on through Jane on Demand, like what are those sort of, I don't know, how do you hype yourself up to do those things when they're scary, to tell your story, to, you know, speak loudly about the things you care about?
I go back to this, that's a great question. I go back to this thing that I always tell myself, like every woman has a story to tell. Every woman has a story to share. Every woman has something to say. So we have to keep saying those things. We have to keep using our voices. I was the shyest little thing you've ever seen in your life. I was quiet. I never, I raised my hand in class as a kid. And yet, like, the second, I don't know, the second I could, I just started screaming. I just started being like, no, you can't. Rape is not good. I don't want to do that. Like, I just started raising my voice. And so I think you have to keep supporting yourself. It's not only about supporting women. You have to support yourself from the inside. And that's sort of how, like, my code. I just go, okay, this is my hurdle today. This is my hurdle this hour. I'm going to get through it, and then I'm going to be on the other side of it. It might hurt a little bit, but I'm going to get on the other side of it. I did not think I would survive the year my daughter was 3. I didn't think. I thought she was thrown out the window. But like, now she's 20 and she's got, like, a great view of Boston, and she's doing great. Like, you just, you could be in the tunnel and just being like, and you're going to get out of it. You're just going to come out of it on the other side.
I love that. And, I also think too, there are so many things that, like, even for me being like, well, I didn't think 10 years ago when I started doing this that we would still be talking about this. And I'm sure you feel the same way about a lot of different issues that got you riled up. Like, we're still having to get out here and be like, sexual violence is bad. And so what are, like, you have such optimism. I think this is a moment where a lot of people don't have optimism. So I'm curious about, like, what does keep you optimistic, but what are those things that have continued to keep you angry too? Like, what are those unfinished fights that you're still really intent on continuing?
I think that by nature, I stay optimistic. Like, this is going to drive you crazy, but I wake up going, okay, now what? And usually it's my dog, because he's like, I got to eat. Obligation makes it really possible to get out of bed. Like, obligation makes it really hard to just be like, no, not today. So I start with that.
Yeah.
I am so furious about what's happening right now with what's her face, with the 7 kids and the Supreme Court. Like, and I'm, terrified about what's going to happen on election day, but I'm not going to give up. I've registered to go vote in person. Like, I'm doing my, as Gloria Steinem said, my everyday act of rebellion. I'm doing it every single day. I'm doing it, and I'm not going to let the stuff that's outside this bedroom that I'm talking to you from get in my way.
Totally. And I do want to, I know it's coming up on like 12:40, so I just want to check in and see if folks have questions that they want to drop into the chat. I would love to take some questions from the audience. I think right now it's more just, have you sold a TV or movie rights to your life? Because it's something folks would like to see.
Oh my God, who doesn't want to see me high on ecstasy from the year I was 25 to the year I was 27? Who doesn't want to see that? That was awesome. Every weekend.
Yeah, there's a demand for it already.
Yeah, that was, or all those, like, sometimes I wonder, where are all those dumb people I had sex with? Where are they all now? I don't know.
The lingering thoughts that have followed you. And well, there are also now some Janes, Lynn and Diana. They're coming together to make it happen. So we're going to have to get everyone connected so that, let's start shopping it around, writing those proposals, maybe a limited series. But I guess something that I've also been wondering about through this conversation is, on that other side of 50, how has your activism evolved? Like, you talked about obviously like marching on days on end in the 90s, and also now we're all stuck inside, but what does sort of your contemporary activist life look like compared to that DIY punk life that you were, enmeshed in when you started Bust?
Well, it's really funny. I'm blogging. I started blogging right after the last election because I was so upset, like we all were. And when I first started blogging, I was blogging every day because I had, maybe I had more time on my hands. I had like a dead end job, so I would blog at the dead end job, just being like, I got nothing else to do. I'm just going to be. But I do blog, and I think like even I have like the 30 or 35 people who read my blog every day. I love them so much because they're always writing to me. But like I'm speaking to a small audience of women who understand what I'm going through. So that's like a bit of activism. I post on I do all the things that a lot of us do, which is like post on our socials. I talk to my friends. I have like a little group of friends that I try to see either in person or on Zoom, even in the pandemic, every week. And, just like kibitz. Again, those are little everyday things that I can do to like push my activism forward. And, my dream is to go to grad school next year and write my thesis on ageism, because I have so much to say about what happens to women after they turn 50 and are no longer, who all start to resemble like a person's mom and no longer belongs in the office space. I have so much to say about that. That's really like, that's the next thing for me.
I'm like, talk to me about that. What are some of the things that are riling you up?
Oh, help me. It's so funny. It's like, there is so much. Sorry, I just peeked at the question. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
No, go for it.
There's so much embedded patriarchy in the corporate world. There's so much of it. And you have to spend, I was working at a cool ass brand, like it was cool ass. And I spent half of my day pivoting from men, just like going, all right, how do I not punch him in the box now? How do I not punch him in the box now? How do I make him shut up? It's a lot of like negotiating in your mind of like, okay, if you do this, it's strategy. And like, thank God when I was at that job, I had a kid. So I was like constantly like, if I give you a cookie, will you stop whining at me? So it was like I used those same strategies that I did in the office space. Like what can I put forward so that I can take back? And really, like a lot of it, I think I heard Tressie McMillan Cotton say this recently. When you're moving through the patriarchal world, you can take, and you and I'm paraphrasing, but you don't have to give, you just have to take. And that's sort of like how I sort of moved in that world. I was just like, really? No, I'm going to implement processes and you guys are going to abide by the processes. So you can't just take advantage of me. I'm going to take advantage of you. But not only am I going to do that, I'm going to protect my team so that you don't come in with your dirty paws and try to like dirty this shit up. So it was a lot of that. It was a lot of like what I was learning at home and bringing it into the office space.
I had a boss once who, she would just mother when she wanted to, like she was the only person who could get everything she wanted, even out of people who had technically power, hierarchical power over her, because she would just talk to everyone the way that she talked to her child when they were misbehaving. And it was 100% of the time, it was like her superpower at work was she was like, I'm just going to walk in there and be like, I'm sorry, do you not feel heard? Let's talk about that. So yeah, that was her secret power.
And I think too, like we also see a secret power. We can play the other scene in our mind, and as long as you see the other scene going on in your mind and you're having a laugh, you can deal with the stupid, because there's a lot of stupid, right? There's a lot.
So the answer is just pretend that you're punching them in the face when you're actually talking to them like you would talk to a child. That's how you get through the corporate workforce.
Because the other thing is, like, we don't have to, in the corporate world, we don't have to please anybody. We have to do our jobs. Bless you. We have to do our jobs. And that's really the important thing, is that you do your job and that you protect your team and that you give your team their credit and that kind of thing. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to say yes when it's going to hurt your team members or hurt your work.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, when you talk about motherhood and when we talk about like ageism, what has changed about the way you move through the world? Because you obviously so clearly move through the world so fearlessly yourself, right? But how has motherhood and just, I mean, life sort of changed the way that you operate, that you interact and engage?
Motherhood made me fearless. Before I became a mom, I was reckless in that, like, I could stay up for 24 hours a day. Like, it didn't even bother me. I could sleep for 3 days in a row. Didn't bother me. I could, you know, I didn't drink alcohol, but I could party. You know, I could do things that required that extra oomph. Like if we'd had Red Bull then, you know, like I was like, I could have been the poster child for that. You know, like I lived at such a high level, and I never stopped. But that also like has its downsides. It has like, you know, I slept a lot, you know, that kind of thing. But when I became a mother, and so many of you at the Jane Club probably understand this, you know, that instinct to protect this little person, that came, I didn't even know that was going to happen. Like there was no one warned me that I would be like, no, stay back. I'm Wonder Woman. Like I thought I had a superpower, but I became some other level. Like I became some other level of bitch ass bitch. Like don't fuck these two. That is what motherhood taught me. It taught me to be fearless. Like not to like, uh, not that I did it that much, but not to take anything. So like it made being in the corporate world a lot, you know, I was very aware of the stupid, but it made it doable because I had a bigger mission in mind, and the mission was take care of my kid. This job makes it possible to take care of my kid, and when I go home, I'm going to be sitting on my couch with my kid, like that. You know, I would leave every day at 6. I didn't believe that I had to work like, you know, the extra hours. Like it was just focus, focus, focus.
Definitely. And I just noticed that, Amy, you said you had a question. Did you want to ask it?
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, Amy.
Um, hey, Marcelle, thank you so much. This is so inspiring.
You.
I was curious. I work on a campaign called Plan C for abortion pill access. And as I was hearing you talk about the punk movement, and I think you mentioned like the gender hierarchies being flipped in the punk movement. We talk about ideas like, what does civil disobedience look like just getting abortion pills to the people who need them, like what does it mean to resist? And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on connecting your roots in the punk movement to what's required right now to ensure that feminist values are happening in the US, and that something like, you know, abortion access continues even if the administration is not in service of people's needs.
This is like, I think about this all the time. I mean, almost every day, because I have a kid who a girl, you know, so who's at some point is going to need uh, help that I can't provide. And you know, the answer is you have to fight every single day. Dana Marlowe has this organization called I Support the Girls, and she's doing exactly what you're doing, but on the other side, she's delivering feminine. Of course they're feminine, sanitary napkins and bras and that kind of thing to women in need.
Right.
Right? You
Yep.
know, you should connect with her. Like
Yeah.
you
I
tell her,
just heard about them. I think my friends just supported them online.
I've donated so many bras because you know what happens to bras after a year, they just stretch out and they don't fit your boobs anymore. Um, but like in terms of of Plan C and all and sorry, all this stuff like the pill, we have to, you know, if you can connect with other organizations that are like yours, then you are power in numbers. You know, the force. You know, it's like force. You know what I mean? There's more power in numbers. There's the fact that you are out talking to me from a tree in a beautiful street. Like you're doing the work. Like you thinking about these things
Yeah.
every single minute of the day, I'm sure, except when you go home and go to sleep.
Yeah.
But like that's what I would recommend is like keep doing the work. Oh, God bless you. I'm so happy you're doing that. And really
Thank
a big
you.
shout to Dana Marlowe because like she's
Yeah.
created a movement of volunteerism and activism with people donating bras and not, and sanitary napkins and stuff like that to women in need. And really, it's the women in need
Awesome.
who are going to need you
Yep.
when these idiots go ahead and make their decisions without our asking us for our opinion.
Yep. Thank you. I love that. Thanks.
I love that so much. It also makes me wonder too if there are, like, I feel like bust represents sort of another wave in feminism. And I know a lot of people who don't like to think of feminism in waves, but sort of this third wave of feminism. Was there ever a way in which, like, I feel like bringing a punk sensibility to feminism isn't something that maybe a Gloria Steinem would have said that she was doing, but how do you feel like that has sort of shaped your own feminism? And have you ever felt like at odds with that more mainstream feminism?
No, I think feminism, like style, is so personal, right? Like, I want to wear black, she wants to wear pink. Cool. You do you, I do me. As long as we really understand what is at the bottom line is that we are of equal value, and we have some work to do to make sure that men and women understand that they are of equal value. I bet you that Gloria Steinem is a supporter of punk rock. Like, I bet you. And I want to give credit too to Rebecca Walker, because I believe like she's the person who coined third wave feminism. And like third wave feminism, we had like a little pocket of time. It really was in the 90s, and then like so many of the waves, we kind of like took our eyes off the ball so that we can do other things, have babies, help deal with our parents who are elderly, that kind of thing, because activism really requires so much of you. I love what's happening. I think we're in a fifth wave. I love what's happening. Like I love what's happening. I don't condemn any of the waves. I think they're all doing work. The more women speak up from generation to generation, the more they engage other women and teach other women. I had an intern who worked for me, was wearing an Anita Hill button, and she looked at the button and she said, "Oh, who's that on? Who's that lady that you're wearing on your chest there?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's Anita Hill!" Like, she's 25, and she's like, "Who's that?" And I was like, I know. My face turned into a thumb. I was like, I don't understand what just happened here. And I said, "Oh, do you know who Clarence Thomas is?" And she's like, and I was like, "Do you know who Kerry Washington is?" And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Kerry Washington played Anita Hill in a Lifetime movie." Like, I felt like I was doing a mitzvah, like I felt like I was giving back, because like she missed something in her journey, but now I opened the door up for her. So I don't know. I think like that's what we have to keep doing. We have to keep doing that work. We have to keep, here, read this book by Octavia Butler. Here, read this book. Like just keep giving each other stuff that inspires us, so that maybe they might inspire that person.
Awesome. I love that so much. Thank you so much. I know we're running out of time. And I'm just so grateful for you taking this time to be with us today. And I'm so honored to have talked to you. And I want to thank all the Janes who are on the line. This was a lot of fun and really fantastic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Vote, feminist ladies, vote.
I know, I love the shirt. I was like, where did she get it? Where can we get it?
Diana Kane made it.
I'll have to find the link and put it in Slack for everyone. And for our Janes who are here, I just want to give a reminder before folks start leaving the Zoom room, that if you post about Jane on your social and you tag us, you'll get 20% off your next month's membership. There's also, this is the last programming of the day, but this week we're doing tons of feminist and political stuff. Don't miss our phone banks, our text banks. Our Prop 14 event is tomorrow. And we're talking to the Future Now Fund about where, why, and how to give before the election on Thursday. And to any potential Janes, we're really glad you came today. I think Dory has a special code for folks to join the village and get $10 off your first month. So thank you so much for being here. Hope you love it. Come join us in the digital village. And yeah, one more round of virtual applause for Marcelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. This was really amazing.
Thank you, everyone, for logging in, zooming in. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
All right, I'm gonna log off now.
Heck yes. I'm like, I'll shut down the room.